Speaker. I rise to express disappointment on behalf of Green Party NI at the failure to create our own path in the Assembly and go our own way in pensions as we had the potential to do. I think we've failed to make devolution work for public sector workers in Northern Ireland. As we're aware, there were those who were willing to abdicate responsibility in this bill by through the process of legislative consent motion, and I think there has been some acknowledgement through their agreement to some of the amendments that have come forward that was the wrong path to choose. And I do welcome that, whilst overall I'm disappointed in the bill, that we have been able to break parity, which is what we have done in Northern Ireland, and make some modifications to what would have otherwise been handed down from Westminster. And I'm sure the firefighters in particular will be grateful that we did indeed choose to legislate ourselves for pensions and to make special provision taking account of the particular needs of firefighters. But this is a bill that essentially came from London and was introduced for London. It does not sit well in the Northern Ireland context. As I said at a previous stage, much has been made for the rationale of this bill around the increase in life expectancy and therefore the increased pressure on pensions. But we must contrast the life expectancy of 73 in Belfast with the life expectancy in Kensington of 85. And when we hear the Conservative government talk about future plans to increase the state pension age, I think it is living in the bubble of London on which they base their proposals for pension provision rather than governing as I'm sure the unionist politicians would believe they should on behalf of the whole of the UK, though of course they do not have a mandate in the whole of the UK. There has been, to some degree, parties playing two different hands, one hand in Westminster and one in the Assembly, arguing that they've challenged the pensions bill and opposed the pensions bill in Westminster while seeking to implement it with insufficient amendment, in my opinion, in the Assembly. And I think it's regrettable that the principles that those parties applied in Westminster wasn't carried over to their roles in the Assembly. Much has been made to the cost of the block grant, and of course that is a significant factor in the issues we're discussing. But as has been pointed out by other speakers, a macroeconomic case has not been made for this bill. So account, in this case including in the Westminster's decision, making increased productivity in the economy has not been taken account of during the pensions debate. Specific to Northern Ireland, not seeking to increase the pension age along with the state pension age. No assessment has been made of the increased spend through increased pensions coming into Northern Ireland on the wider Northern Ireland economy. The impact of youth employment and indeed the cost of youth employment has not been factored in to the figures we're presented with, and the cost of increased sick pay and loss of productivity in the public sector or public services has not been factored in. So simply stating the cost of the block grant is only giving one side of the table of costs and benefits of breaking with parity, and that's, I said before, this was an accountant's bill, and that in itself is not good accountancy. As I said, I welcome that acknowledgement has been made for the particular role of firefighters and police, but I do regret that it hasn't been extended to other areas. I regret that my own amendment to include paramedics and prison officers in such provisions was rejected, though I thank those who did support the amendment. But other, as has been mentioned, other professions such as teachers and nurses again, and hopefully with the review that was secured through amendment at further consideration stage, that these other professions can be given further consideration, and the evidence that comes out of the working longer review can also be factored in. I regret, and it's continued today, the ideological attack that's persisted on the trade unions, and the fact that the amendment to give trade unions a place on the Pensioners Board was not accepted. And I think it's right that those of us who defended trade unions did so, the right of workers to organise, unionise and to lobby in a professional and correct manner. I think it's right that we defended their ability to do so. And as we have heard today, the public versus private argument is made. And what I would say to those workers who I equally sympathise with in private sector, who are not getting their right working conditions and the right provisions in their pensions, is indeed to unionise, to join trade unions, and to ensure that they do what they can to lobby their employers for better pay and conditions. And if they do so, they will certainly receive my support in doing so. We need to move on from the conversation of how we bring still some of the lowest paid workers, including some of those in the public services, still some of the lowest paid workers in our society, how we bring their terms and conditions down to the level of the private sector, and instead discuss how we bring the pay and conditions for those in the private sector at the lowest end up, because there's clearly room to do that. And I mentioned the high-paid CEOs in the private sector. A bit of fairness within the organisations that they work could help mitigate against the problems faced by private sector workers. We do not need to continually attack public sector workers. So I said previously in the debate on this bill that we needed realistic and affordable pension provision that served the common good. I don't believe we have that, and that's why I don't believe I can support the pensions bill.
Call on the Minister to include the final statement.